our MAG 911 Study Committee. We'll now call this meeting to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you'd like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table. If you purchase a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. We'll now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members. So if MAG staff will do that roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will go through the list of members. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Dale Nanigay.
Present.
Thank you. Dan Cotterman.
Here.
Thank you. Joshua Wright.
Here.
Thank you. David Raymer.
I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Co-Chair Phelps.
Here.
Thank you. Santiago Rodriguez.
Present. Thank you.
Thank you. Co-Chair Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Travis Cutright.
Here.
Thank you. Brittany Brunet.
Present.
Thank you. Scott Walker.
Present.
Thank you. Jesse Cooper.
Present, attending virtually.
Edward,
Thank you, Jesse.
584938.
Robert Bokinski.
Present virtually.
Thank you, Robert. Karen Sutherland.
Here.
Thank you. And Catherine Masters. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. All right. The next item 2 is call to the audience. Do we have any audience requests to speak? Okay, thank you. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website 1 hour prior to the meeting. So do we have any written comments?
No, we have not received any public comments for this item or any other item on the agenda.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll go to item number 3, this approval of the January 23rd, 2023 MAG 911 Study Committee meeting minutes. So the next item is approval of these minutes. Does any member of the committee have any questions or comments on the minutes? If not, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve minutes of January 23rd, 2023.
So we have a motion from Mr. Phelps. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Walker. Motion and a second. Kind of a voice vote from those in the room. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, staff, will you provide a roll call of members participating virtually?
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Dan Cotterman.
Aye.
Thank you. David Raymer.
Aye.
Thank you. Santiago Rodriguez.
Aye.
Thank you. Jesse Cooper.
Aye.
Thank you. And Robert Bokinski.
Aye.
Is there anyone that I missed? Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. We're next going to item 3, which is an opportunity for us to hear from our 911 consultants, Federal Engineering. They'll provide an overview to committee about the planned work. Is it Scott Strom?
Yeah.
Operations Manager is here to provide the overview. Thank you, Mr. Strom, for joining us today. Would you like to start with some introduction and just kind of introduce yourself and your firm for us first before we open up for questions?
Sure, absolutely. Mike, welcome everyone, and we really appreciate you taking the time to provide us the opportunity to sit with you folks today and answer any questions you may have, and also provide you with a a short overview of the project as we understand it, and kind of our game plan moving forward here. My name is Scott Strom. I'm with Federal Engineering. I'm the project manager assigned to this project by Federal Engineering. I bring to the team a little over 30 years of direct project management experience and a little over 25 years of public safety 911 experience on a broad range of public safety projects, from next gen 911, GIS projects, consolidation projects, and PSAP assessment projects. With me today, I have three of our team members, Eric Perry and Steve Verbal. Our third member, Tom Paniak, he's not with us today. He's on another project site, but Eric and Steve are both available today. They both are senior consultants with Federal Engineering and bring a wealth of knowledge and experience across a number of different public safety spectrums. Both have worked within dispatch centers, PSAP centers, have that management experience. Steve specifically from the fire side, and Eric from the operational side and from the police side of the house. And both bring a state level expertise, also having run and been 911 coordinators and administrators. Steve for working in the state of Connecticut, and Eric on in the state of Utah. I have a brief, probably 10 slides overview here. If you'd like me to go through that first, or I'll throw it back to you right now if you guys have any initial questions or any other things you wanted to talk about first before we go into the overview
All
itself.
right, thanks, Scott. What the preference, would you like to move forward with this presentation? Yeah, okay. Yeah, Scott, go ahead and move forward with your presentation. That may prompt us to come up with some questions for follow-up.
All right. Am I able to share my screen, or is somebody going to drive it for me as I'm going through this? I see it up.
Yes, Tyler will be moving the slides for you. Just let him know by saying next slide when you'd like him to proceed to the next one.
Gotcha. Perfect.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay. All right, I'm just doing a little bit of adjusting on my desktop here, so bear with me just for a second. Okay, we went through introductions here. Let me get the project goals as we understand it, and were reiterated to us from the RFP itself and the scope of work, is really threefold. Our first focus will be on really meeting with everybody that's involved in the MR 911 and within this program and the 911 system that's currently in place right now. I understand there's at least 24 participating agencies or member agencies and stakeholders that we'll be meeting with. And really our goal at that point in time in this first stage will be to sit down and interview members of those agencies. And I'm going into a little bit greater detail in coming slides here. But really gain an overall understanding and gather as much information as we can with a focus on not so much what is going on with the current system, but looking at it from a standpoint of what would be everybody's ideal system and functionality, and look into the future of how and where they want to see the system going and being maintained going forward. The second goal then would be, once we've gathered that information, is to really look at the current technology that's in place within the system itself, what technology is available or could be made available for potential use at the state level, and also what technology is being used out there potentially from peers throughout the country and within the state, and what is out there from a technological standpoint, from an emerging standpoint on technologies, and how that may be utilized, or at least a game plan or recommendation put in place to be able to look at those technologies going downstream and being incorporated, or the possibility of being incorporated within the system going forward. And then the third goal is basically taking all of that information then and coming back to the MAG and to the MR 911 stakeholders with an overall game plan and evaluation and recommendations on 911 technologies going forward. Next slide, please. A little bit more detail here. Our project approach when we do these types of projects is to break the project down into phases or tasks. Again, each one of these phases, while it looks like it's serial in nature, a number of these phases will actually be ongoing at the same time. For instance, as we're gathering the information in phase one, getting an understanding of the system itself and the stakeholders and their desires and needs going forward. We're also really looking at and gathering information and starting to look at, the phase two, the actual technologies that will potentially be incorporated and utilized going forward. So a number of these phases will certainly be at least overlapped, and they may not be coincidental, but there'll certainly be some overlap in some of these moving forward. And then, of course, phase three is going to be, bringing everything together in the form of a final recommendations report. One of the things I want to stress going forward is, the advent of making sure that we're communicating throughout the entire project, and that there's a quality assurance in place internally here at Federal Engineering. We meet, our project managers all meet on a weekly basis, not only with our direct reports and our directors, but also with management themselves, just to make sure that we're all on the same page from a resource alignment, and also any overlaps, and also trading of any information that we find out from project to project. So we're constantly sharing data, being able to use that knowledge and conveying that knowledge and sharing that knowledge with our clients as we're moving forward. So I just want to make sure, I stress that going forward, that, we have that ability to do that, and we certainly do that, and make sure that we integrate that into our projects. Next slide, please. Just focal points on each of the phases as we go down through there. So the phase one, really the focal point is going to be the project initiation, which basically today is the start of that, and it's really the focus, as I said, is on the data gathering and information, and also the agency interviews. And those agency interviews, we're going to be really focused on meeting with representatives of the city itself. So probably a city manager, either a police or fire representative, whoever has authority or jurisdiction over the 911 comms, and then also the PSAP manager with each of those agencies. So basically three areas or three entities within each of those agencies. Steve and Eric will be sitting with and discussing and talking with each one of those individuals to gain their overview and interpretation, and just gather as much information as we can on their thoughts and plans going forward, and what they really would like to see from an ideal 911 system, being put in place and planned for into the future. And as the outcome, a deliverable outcome for that particular phase will be the summary of that input and information gathering into a report that each one of these reports that I'll go over today, there's basically three of them, we'll be making sure that we sit with the groups and review the drafts, and then of course the finals going forward. Next slide, please. Phase two, again, the look at the current emerging technologies. Focal points here would be, what's currently in place from a technology analysis standpoint. What are some of the emerging technologies. And then also another aspect I want to touch on here, I didn't have listed in the original presentation here, but one of the things we'll be looking at too is when we're looking at some of the peers and some of the other entities throughout the country that are doing this sort of thing also is looking at the funding mechanism. You know, how do they go about funding their systems going forward? So we want to make sure that, you know, we capture some of that and provide that as part of this analysis also, so that you can get a sense of how other entities peer-wise and throughout the country are funding and handling the funding issues going forward. Again, the deliverable outcome here would be an assessment, technologies assessment and comparison report, taking at information and data within the 911 MR 911 group itself, the state level, what they're offering, and then what's out there from a peer standpoint, and comparing those in a comparative report. Next slide, please. And then finally, phase 3 would be wrapping this up into one overall evaluation and recommendation report that takes into consideration all the recommendations, the functionality that everybody conveyed to us, what their desires are going forward, and then basing it on the information that we've gathered and our expertise and the resources that we have here backside within FE, is putting together an overarching recommendations and evaluation report for the group. Next slide, please. A couple things I want to point out here is we have a clear understanding that there are some there's a desire, a need or desire to get this information back to you folks as quickly as we can. I know there was some back and forth during contract negotiations as to, you know, schedule and timing and things like that. So I have another slide here. We'll touch on some of the timing here. Having said that, the team and we're going to do our absolute best to try and accelerate things when we can and if we can. I don't want to make any overarching promises today, but I'm certainly aware of the fact that, you know, your desires to try to get the information in your hands sooner rather than later for a lot of planning aspects that the folks have going forward and the stakeholders. We understand that and we appreciate that. And we certainly are going to do our absolute best to try to mitigate this as much as we can and try to get you information in your hands as soon as we can. In doing that, it goes without saying, we're going to need a tremendous amount of cooperation amongst all the agencies, especially when it comes to, you know, setting up the interviews and getting the interviews in place with 24 agencies that we're going to be essentially meeting with, you know, 3 folks per entity. That's a tremendous amount of interviews, tremendous amount of logistics that need to take place here, you know, in the early to mid part of March here coming up. So, you know, we're going to seek a lot of cooperation amongst everyone to make sure that we get those on the books and get them scheduled. And one good thing that's going to help us here is both Eric and Steve are both residents of Arizona. Eric, make sure I get this right, you and Steve. Eric, you're from the Yuma area and Steve is from the Phoenix area, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. So, you know, they're right there in Arizona, right in the back door, especially Steve. And so, you know, we won't have a lot of travel logistics, so to speak, air miles or anything like that. So that'll be good. So if we need to make some impromptu visits, follow-ups, things like that, we certainly can do that. And we certainly are available and plan on doing that when and as needed. But I just can't stress enough the cooperation that we're going to need going forward here to make sure we meet not only the deadlines we have in place right now, but if we want to have any chance of trying to, gain any efficiencies and move this project up at all, we're going to need that. The other thing I want to stress too here, and that really goes to the last 4 bullets here, is we look at these projects as being in partnership with our clients. We try not to, as much as possible, collect data and then go squirrel away somewhere for several months and then, come swooping in and plop down a report for you kind of out of the blue. We want to make sure that we're in partners with our clients, try to communicate as much information as we can, as often as we can. And through each of these phases, at each stage and milestone where there's a deliverable report, we will submit a draft deliverable to you. We plan on having a sit down where Steve and Eric will come in and present the findings or review the draft, if you will. Have any kind of a discussion, any comments, questions, things like that. Open that draft up for a brief review period, and then come back and address any comments or concerns that you may have, and then finalize the report. And we'll do that at each milestone iteration of the 3 deliverables that I mentioned earlier. That's a process that we do on virtually every project that we have, where we have some type of report deliverable. It just seems to work out very well with us. It establishes a great relationship and communication going forward, making sure that everybody has a clear understanding of what's being developed, what's being discussed, what's being talked about. So there really shouldn't be any surprises, going forward once we certainly deliver a final report, and do any kind of formal, presentations at the end of the project. Everybody should be well aware of, what the findings are, what the recommendations are, and are comfortable at the end of the project. Next slide, please. And finally, just from a contractual standpoint, these were the initial milestone dates, I believe, that we had in our proposal that were pulled over into the contract. Again, the first phase, the needs assessment, the interview and fact finding, gathering, and the subsequent report coming out of that, summation report. We're looking to deliver that on April the 21st. Phase 2 would be the review of the current emerging 911 technologies. That's slated for May 26th. And then finally, the final evaluation and recommendations report on July 14th. Again, these are definite milestones that we're seeking to hit, recognizing the fact that if we can get into areas, gather information, and be efficient on our end, we'll, as a team, make the commitment to try and accelerate or move up some of these areas. And looking at it, I think there's definitely a possibility of being able to move up some of these to get the information back into your hands. But again, it's just going to need the cooperation of everybody moving forward, and everything going smoothly from a draft review and final review standpoint. So, but I just want to make sure that we recognize that, and we're certainly looking forward and willing to move things if we can absolutely possibly can with the team. Next slide. All right, that was a quick overview, just based on things within the scope. I tried to touch on, I know some of the touch points that were relayed to us at the beginning of this project, and we're looking forward to getting started here and getting things scheduled. And I'll open up the the floor right now to any questions that Steve and Eric and myself may be able to answer for you folks.
All right, thank you very much. Audrey, do you have anything you want to say or?
I would just add that we will be working on those preliminary reviews of materials with the advisory team so that we can move those efficiently through the system and keep things moving. And so we will continue to work with the group that did the selection to get that done.
Yeah, and I would thank you for the presentation. We appreciate that. We're, I think we're excited to get this process launched. As you can imagine, this is of high priority across the whole region. 911 systems you kind of just take for granted after a while and just expect it to always happen. And so any conversations we have around this has to be given a lot of attention and concern. So we appreciate your efforts to be part of this effort here in this region. So with that, let me just, I've got several questions, but let me ask others if you have any questions for federal engineering so they can ask. I would say, well, I'd really say this one. One of the things maybe we could do, and I'm trying to think when our next MAG Management Committee meeting is, I'm assuming it's 1st of March sometime. Maybe one of the things, it'd be helpful, maybe we could put this on the agenda just again to remind everyone kind of what the schedule is. This is coming. If they haven't already made themselves available, the communities to be available for the meetings, conversations, maybe we could emphasize that. And just, I think it'd be good just to kind of have a standing report from this committee to the management committee, just so they can know progress. So maybe you could work on that just to kind of put us on that agenda if you
Certainly,
don't mind.
Chair, I will.
Okay,
I will
thank you.
talk to the staff person for that committee.
Okay.
Yeah, do you guys typically meet once a month then?
So this committee can meet more frequently, but the MAG, since we're a subcommittee, we can meet probably, we have a lot more flexibility. I think we've got some scheduled dates, but then we're a subcommittee of the larger management committee, which has all of those, well, almost all those committees you just talked about are participating in that conversation. So that is a monthly meeting.
Okay.
So, all right. So, where do we want to start? Kevin, please.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. A couple of questions. In your phase 2, you discussed looking at both the current technologies and then emerging technologies. Can I assume that when you're looking at current technologies, there will also be an assessment of where the gap is at with what we currently have? In other words, emerging technologies are sometimes down the road. So will you be showing what is kind of considered best practice for technologies and then doing an assessment whether or not there's a gap for getting the emerging technology component of it?
Yeah, I mean, that would certainly be one of the aspects of that particular phase. Yeah.
Okay, then when you were looking at the emerging technologies, and will you, in your recommendations, be showing things like risk and cost and flexibility as part of your assessment?
I'd have to go back and check on it. I don't know to what depth we get into that. A full blown, cost type of analysis. But I can look at that and I can follow up with that.
What about the risk side of it?
Risk as far as,
Well, anytime you're implementing new technology, emerging technologies, it usually comes inherent with a certain amount of risk of successful implementation, maintaining scope and cost and schedule. Will that be something, if you're recommending we go to adopting emerging technologies, will we have that full assessment so we know, what we're getting ourselves into?
yeah, I mean, yes, there'll be some form of a risk, identification of risks or issues, if you will, going into, going from what you may currently have right now versus going into something else, whether it's something being provided by the state or something that, is out there from an emerging technology. And some of these technologies may be things that are going to be coming down the road that aren't quite ready for things right now, but just items to from a planning perspective to be planning for, or recognizing that they may be coming down the line and should be, at least on the radar going forward.
Yeah, I don't know about the rest of the committee members, but for me, I mean, I'm always intrigued by emerging technologies, but I'd want to know kind of what what the risk is. And at the end of the day, we have to have a system that's reliable and has the resiliency. We want to be forward looking. And so I would hope that as we're doing this, that when we get into the discussion, whether you're going to propose a best of suite versus a best of breed, that we understand the risk as we go forward. I don't know how we could make a good recommendation without at least having a good discussion of that.
Scott, this is Chris. I think, and Kevin, tell me if this is way off. So I like your assessment of where we are, obviously current technologies. You need to understand that. Then I think there's kind of the evaluation of what's happening out there, best practices that are advanced from where we are today, that's already being utilized, implemented in other parts of the country, maybe even internationally, and knowing what that is so that it's kind of a proven technology beyond where we are. And then I think to Kevin's point, maybe to your point too, is we need to know what the future is, because if that's coming, we need to develop the conditions that allow us to adjust to that into the future. Whether or not that's actually being implemented or not right now, at least understand what the industry is looking at into the future so we can position ourselves going forward. But I think we need to have that spectrum, right, of kind of who we are today, our baseline, kind of what our best practices, things maybe that we haven't implemented that are happening out there already than in other larger regions like ours, but also looking out to kind of where the industry is going and just trying to understand what that might mean as we build our system today is like, how do we prepare for tomorrow? So I think that conversation would be helpful in your evaluation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that, because that provides you then with the information that you're going to need as the advisory committee, and the group at large, going forward to be able to make those types of decisions.
Right.
So, certainly.
So as long as we have that kind of understanding, you can just kind of help pull us along through that. I think what we need is you to kind of tell us who we are, as it relates to what is out there already and then where the future might be. And then we can have that other conversation. Maybe when you bring that to us, we can have those conversations about, well, even if we were to make changes in who we are today, how does that position us for the future? So I think that would be a good follow-up conversation to happen later on. So Kevin, anything else? All right, Scott, did you? Yeah, go ahead. No,
just kind of building upon Mr. Phelps and Mr. Brady's comments, as you look at the current mRNA model, the current what's in this space, a current offering of the state, really I would like to see it as a risk-benefit analysis, right? So there's obviously risk, but what's the benefit? If you could capture, maybe that's your plan, but really in that risk-benefit analysis. So obviously we're willing to take some risk oftentimes if the benefit is equal or greater. And so we could capture it that way, and then again, agree with you as far as emerging technologies, where obviously next gen 901 is going to continue to build over really probably the next decade. That prepares us on our strategic plan as we move forward and where we want to get to over the next 5, 10, 15 years. I think presenting it that way would be helpful for me.
Yeah. And I think just making sure that, in whatever direction you're going, that you're being positioned in a certain way that you can make that change or that leap. And you've set yourself up for that going forward.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Del, did you have anything? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only have one question, and it's when you get to the recommendation phase, will there be one recommendation for direction, or is it possible there would be multiple recommendations, which includes the risk and the costs of different paths we could take if there's a need for change?
Could be all the above. It's probably, I would imagine there's probably going to be a couple different options. going forward across a few different categories. You know, from technology standpoint, from, you know, maybe funding standpoint, you know, governance standpoint, just different things like that. With the primary focus being on the technology side. Most of the time, whenever we do recommendations, you know, it's typically not just one recommendation going forward.
Thank you. That's the only question. I
All
have.
right, then we'll just come around this way. So Josh, and then just keep going.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Strom, question I have about the analysis that you'll be doing on comparing this region to others that may have adopted different models of technology. The question I have is, will you also provide any insight into how those regions are governed or how their structure looks in terms of how they're run from a administrative standpoint, financing, how decisions are made for those regions? I'm learning a lot with this committee that we have an interesting model of how the money flows and how decisions are made and approved. And I'm curious if that is something that is also common in other parts of the country.
Yeah, I think part of that, I think I would probably fall under the phase 2 aspect of it. But looking at, you know, the different, what I'll call the peer reviews, you know, certainly we would provide, you know, information at a high level, but like what type of a governance model do they operate under as compared to, or that you can use as a comparison to how, you know, you operate and function right now as a group, just to give you some different ideas out there where you may be aligned or where you may not be, and what, you know, what success they have in how they operate, you know, based on their governance models. But that certainly would be, you know, something that we would make sure we include.
Great, thank you.
And Scott, just while you're on that topic, maybe as you're looking at those different governance models, somewhere in that conversation, maybe there's a way to help us understand, you know, like I don't know how the right way to compare regions. Is it funding for 911 per capita? Just to try to understand, are we, you know, where do we stand as far as the resources we have available to dedicate to providing the technology, providing all of the equipment that we need? I don't know if there's a way in that conversation as you're looking at those different peers to understand also kind of what resources they have. And I don't know what the right analysis is to compare, trying to bring that right in a comparison. I don't know if that's something by the number of people they serve, or I don't know what the right way to do that is, but that might be helpful. Maybe part of the challenge could be not only is it governance, but it's are we allocating enough resources, or we are allocating enough resources, we just do it in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, probably really looking at it more from, you know, a funding model. How, you know, how are you funded? How do you allocate that? And then, you know, how are other areas or other peers, you know, how do they fund? You know, is it strictly entirely 100% from the state, or, you know, do the agencies, member agencies themselves, you know, have a cost sharing factor, or, you know, what's their funding model and how does it work?
Okay, that'd be great.
You know, at a high level, you know, I mean, we're not doing an in-depth analysis on every one of these models, but it'll at least give you an idea of, you know, how other people are functioning out there and how it compares to what you are or are not doing, you know, within the state of Arizona, and specifically for the Maricopa region.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To add on to the previous comments earlier comments that were made, and maybe add some project management to speak to it. I think what we're looking for is in the first phase is to do a business requirements gathering so we can understand what it is that we need today. And then also capture what we would like to have to add on to the system, and then what the possibilities are. So there are like 3 different buckets there. So what we need, what we'd like to have, and what the possibilities are. So those are the things we'd like to get out of the first phase.
Right? Karen?
I'm just curious about the interview process that you're going to be going through with all of the agencies. You said that there's 24 agencies and that you expected to interview approximately 3 people in each agency. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct.
So I imagine that you're looking for a diverse group. So are you specifically going to be reaching out to members of the 911 Oversight Committee and PSAP manager committees, and then maybe the city managers or somebody at that level?
Yeah, the way it was scoped out, the way it was scoped out and conveyed to me when I went back and looked at the scope and the contract and the original scope of work provided by you folks, was that we're being asked to interview basically 3 individuals or their representative. And that would be the city manager, the PSAP manager, and then either the police representative or the fire representative, whoever within that agency has the oversight of the operations of the comm center, the dispatch center within that agency. Sometimes they fall under fire, sometimes they fall under the police. So those would be the 3 representatives that we would be talking to.
Sure. Ms.
Yes,
Sutherland.
Audrey.
Just to add to that, so we are currently creating that list. We would be providing the PSAP manager, preferably the one that's actually serving on the PSAP managers group, the 911 oversight team member, and if there isn't one, we've reached out to find out who the appropriate person is, and then the city manager who could either take that or designate the appropriate person within their organization from that policy standpoint.
And we'll be conducting, just to let everyone know, like those would be 3 for any one agency. Those would be 3 separate interviews. We wouldn't be looking to bring all 3 of those representatives into the same room and interviewing them all at the same time. We want to get each one's perspective individually.
Brittany?
Just really quick, Scott, on the interview process, are you guys also reaching out to the state 911 office and interviewing them and getting their perspective on their side as well?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have.
All right. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
And just a follow-up question, Scott, I know you haven't started your work yet, but do you envision a scenario where the technology recommendation is going to be driven by the governance recommendation? Or do you see those as being really kind of separate, where we can decide on the technology platform and decide governance separate without impacting the decision on the technology?
I mean, I would think that the technology is the technology regardless of what the governance is. The governance to me is more on the operations side, of how you set your policies and procedures and such. I mean, there may be some overflow or tie-in to the technology side. I don't know if Steve or Eric, you guys have any thoughts on that?
No, it's an interesting one. I'll have to chew on that.
Yeah, I got to think that one through a little bit because they are interrelated, but I'm not sure where Kevin, where you're going with that question, because they are interrelated. And I think just to kind of rewind a little bit, one of the main things you're going to be doing first is doing an assessment of your current conditions. And to go back to a previous comment, then once we have the current conditions and we look at the future technologies and we do a gap analysis, because the new technologies, they sort of have emerged already. And in other parts of the country, they're full speed ahead with the migration to EZNets and core services and all that kind of stuff. So not to get you too worried about that. This isn't like a complete reinventing of the wheel starting from scratch. But the question with regard to governance and technology. I think, are you coming from more of an oversight funding perspective on that, Kevin?
No, I don't see in my mind, maybe I'm too broad in the definition of governance. It goes beyond just the funding model. That's one whole problem. It's really how are decisions made? How do you implement? How do you manage the system? And what I want to know going in is if we lock in on a certain type of governance, does that hamstring us or tie our hands with what technology? If so, we could be talking about that as a policy. And at the end of the day, that's really a kind of a policy direction. I just want to make, again, governance to me, if it can be separate from the technology, then that's helpful for me to know that going in.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And so Scott, just another couple questions for me. I guess one of the things I'd like to know, how do you determine success in a 911 system, right? What are the true performance measures that we should have now? And what would they look like even going forward? Because, we get caught up in this world of like things are changing and moving forward, but at the end of the day, we're providing a service. And how do we create those expectations of what we're looking for and establish those kind of metrics and then say, okay, how are you going to help us meet those metrics? Who can best meet those metrics? And I think sometimes we spend a lot of time talking about systems and communications and all the workings, but we don't think a lot about, well, how is the system performing? Are there reliability standards? Are there interoperability standards? I don't know there's probably other categories, but, I'm concerned that, those all, somehow we need to continue to lead with that, right? And I don't know if you can help us think about, how do you define success? Or how do you even define how we're doing today? And then say, okay, today your reliability looks like this. Because I know we're challenged with reliability in this past week. I saw email strings where reliability is becoming a concern and there's disruptions to services. So how do we measure, what are those simple measures, dashboard measures that we should maybe think about now, as then we can compare it with whatever direction we're going in the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I'll just follow up. We look forward to having frequent conversations with you all at the right milestones. I'll let you work with Audrey on trying to figure out when we could be most helpful to you in giving direction and, confirmation that things are going the right direction. So go ahead, Scott. I threw a couple things out you there.
Yeah, what I was just going to follow up with that would be one, what you ended there with. Yeah, that'll be very helpful going forward, having some frequent touch points in that regard. But also is, from Eric and Steve's standpoint, there's certainly some items that we could focus on, we could share from, what makes a successful system, either from, industry benchmarks, our own personal knowledge and such. And then also, that's certainly going to be one of the topics that we want to pull out of the interviews with the folks. And it'll be, interesting to see what that answer is from the city manager to the PSAP manager. There's going to be some different perspectives on that, I'm sure. But, getting from the stakeholders, what's their desires from that standpoint? What do they consider, a successful 911 system, across a number of different categories, and you're just making sure we're capturing that information also, not just from our own personal knowledge or industry best practices, but also from the actual stakeholders themselves.
Okay. All right. Those of you online virtually, is there anyone? I'll just kind of look. Robert, do you have any questions, or David or Dan? Not.
Nothing to add.
Okay. Santiago or Jesse, do you have any questions?
No questions. I'm good. Thank you.
None from me, thank you.
All right. Okay,
This is Robert. Same here. Everything's quite clear.
thank you, thank you. All right. Final words, Audrey or Scott, just to kind of wrap this up.
I'm good on my end. I just wanted to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy days. We really appreciate, initiating this project and the relationship. Hopefully we'll build going forward here. And, looking forward to getting back with the team and with Audrey and starting to get some of this planning in place here so we can hit the ground running.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I just want you to be looking for those emails to try to arrange the scheduling. And also those of you who served on the advisory team for some additional emails as we start to get materials about like, what's going to be covered in the interviews and things like that, so that we can get that feedback to the consultant quickly. So that we can keep this process moving forward. And I did make a note about management committee. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can use that to help you out, we'll do that. Okay, great. All right, that will proceed. Thank you for that item. Thank you, Scott, and your team. We'll now move to, we just updates, if there's any updates from our different committees. So first, do we have any comments or presentations from our PSAP group? Brittany, do you have anything or Karen? You good?
So you brought something up when we were just talking about the emails that went around last week. And I was just wondering, do we have an update or any definitive information on the problems that were going on last week?
Are you talking about the wire line problem?
Correct.
No, I haven't got briefed on that yet. This was on for everybody's sake Friday afternoon. We had difficulties with wire line 911 calls that had no data. And because of that, they were going to Phoenix PD. Phoenix PD takes the call. They realize, hey, this is in Chandler, and they transfer it appropriately. We're in the middle of migrating. We have a couple of wireline companies that are already over on the system, but they have stopped because the state has put a pause on it. So the wireline are still with CenturyLink. So my team has we only do wireless, so we have no control of the wireline, but we were working with Comtech and trying to get a solution. It was averaging about 1 an hour of the transfer, and we communicated that to all the PSAPs.
So Liz, is that a system that's managed by the state? Who is the manager of wireline?
So wireline is the project, the NG 911 core service project is managed by the state, and the wireline go through Lumen. They're the ones that traditionally served it, and it's in the middle of the migration of moving it over to Comtech, and the state is in charge of that portion of it.
So it's a state question.
Yeah, it
Okay.
is, but we're as liaisons for the region, technical liaisons, we are involved in it to see what we can do to help.
Okay. Any other questions? Or any other not questions, sorry. Are there any other things from you all? No? Okay, thank you. All right. How about any update from the MAG 911 Oversight Committee?
Mr.
Scott?
Chair, the 911 Oversight Committee has not met since our last meeting, so we have no updates at this time.
All right, thank you. All right. With that, I think that finishes our agenda. Thank you all for attending in person and virtually. It's kind of nice to have a little bit of both. Do we have a schedule for our next meeting, or where are we at on this? Because I thought I saw something go out with a lot of dates. I did not bring it. I apologize.
Yes, we did. Hang on, we'll
Just remind
confirm that
everybody.
date for you.
Next meeting should be on the 20th at 10 o'clock.
All right, Chantel, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We will stand adjourned. Thank you very much.